What's up guys, my name is Jake and welcome to Abandoned, episode 71. In my last episode of Abandoned, I covered the quintessential pavilions for Disney's Epcot Center, and their slow decline over the years. Adjacent to Communicore and later Innoventions East was another, even more beloved Epcot Pavilion. In fact, this ride might be one of, if not the most adored and sorely missed theme park attractions in history. But how could something so revered by fans ultimately close, then later be left abandoned for a short time until it was replaced altogether? Well, let's answer that today in this updated episode of Epcot's Horizons. Today's video is going to be accompanied by a very special project I've been working on for months now. We've created miniature 3D models of 3 of some of my favorite closed, never built, and just awesome Disney parks architecture. Visit shop.brightsunfilms.com to get yours and stick around to the end of the video to find out more information. During the later stages of Epcot's future world planning, the idea of pavilions covering key concepts of our collective future was a big component of the park. From Spaceship Earth covering communication and its surrounding pavilions focusing on hands-on technology, energy, transportation, Earth, imagination, and water. In early concepts of the park, health and fitness, and space were also prevalent. In that later stage though, one last pavilion was also proposed, called Science and Invention, a building that didn't really have much of a refined concept and was purposely left vague to capture new sponsors. That ultimately worked as General Electric came on board to sponsor this new pavilion. At first they wanted to focus on the invention side of things, as well as the future from a consumer product standpoint. The attraction portion was going to take a stylized, quote, Edison look at the past, and then once the ride concluded, you would exit through a large exhibition hall filled with futuristic products on display, showcasing future GE technology. Around this time though, General Electric got a new CEO that wanted the pavilion to focus more on the future. So the pavilion was given the name Century 3, standing for the soon-to-be 3rd century of America. Once GE officially signed with Disney though, the pavilion's name was changed once again, now to Future Probe, with the building more or less in its final stages of exterior design. Inside, the general layout of the Omnimover ride was to feature 3 massive double-decker OmniMax projection screens. This was later scaled down, along with the entire project, receiving a $10 million budget cut. Still, the show building was pretty big, with over 130,000 square feet, allowing a track to span 1,300 feet, making the ride an almost 15-minute long experience. It would feature the aforementioned Omnimover ride system, much like Haunted Mansion, just this time having the vehicle suspended from a track above. Finally, as development continued, the pavilion's name changed once again to its final title, Horizons. All of this had been decided by summer of 1981, just as Epcot was starting serious construction. Horizons was well into development by this point, however it became clear that it wouldn't make opening day. Instead, Epcot Center opened on October 1st, 1982, with Horizons just starting its vertical construction. Massive steel beams rose out of the Florida soil, and soon a building was taking shape. In fact, the right side of the back of house portions were completed first, as the second phase of Epcot Center was to feature a new monorail beam. Proposed as the LBV, or the Lake Buena Vista monorail, it was supposed to be an extension to the existing monorail line circling around Epcot, now running through the southeast portion of the property, all the way to the Walt Disney World Village, now known as Disney Springs. This was a pretty big expansion to the monorail line, and it could be seen in various concept art for Horizons, and especially on late master plan schematics. But these plans were of course abandoned, as was much of the second phase of Epcot Center. Still, Horizons pressed on, finally opening a year after the park to the day on October 1st, 1983. Horizons opened as a pavilion to tie everything else in Future World together. It would more or less combine all the themes explored in Epcot into one attraction, telling a story through the lens of one central family as they invite us into their future. I'll leave some links in the description below for some good ride-throughs of the attraction, but basically guests would enter through a queue almost acting like an airport with a sign reading Futureport and listing all the futuristic destinations you'll be visiting through the attraction. Once boarding the ride vehicles, you'd be taken into a show scene depicting centuries-old interpretations of the future, specifically Jules Verne's trip to the moon. Further on, depictions of a very retro future that never was is on full display. Televisions would populate the next scene, showing pictures of the future in popular culture. Transitioning from here would be a pretty abstract dark room filled with neon signs envisioning the future from the 50s. Then finally moving into modern day technological advances shown on those two massive OmniMax screens. Throughout your journey thus far, the characters of the family would chime in with narrative dialogue. It wouldn't be until the next scene where you finally get to meet the family. First in Nova Site, dubbed the Urban Habitat. You'd be entering through the daily lives of the family as they go about living in the distant future. We then visit the daughter as she works as a harvesting controller in Mesa Verde, a former desert now turned into a crop-filled oasis. We then submerge underwater as we find the boyfriend in Sea Castle, an underwater expedition facility. Finally, we visit Brava Centauri, a bustling and thriving space colony. There, you would conclude your journey with the family as they all group up on a hologram video call and sing happy birthday to the newest member of the family. But the ride doesn't conclude there. In fact, you're given an option to choose your own way back to Futureport. Touch-sensitive buttons would then illuminate on your ride vehicle, to which you can select 3 options: undersea, desert, or space. Your ride vehicle would then enter through a tunnel where a 50-foot screen would match the speed of each car and travel with you, projecting the film of your choosing. Your ride vehicle would vibrate and essentially turn into a simulator experience. The sequences were filmed on enormous miniature models built specifically for Horizons, the desert one in particular being the longest continuous miniature shot ever made. As the ride vehicle concluded and guests walked through the exit tunnel, they'd be greeted by one last piece of incredible artwork, this time in the form of a 60-foot-long mural by famed artist Robert McCall, titled The Prologue and the Promise. It took over 9 months to complete and served as a pretty inspirational send-off from Horizons. Like all pavilions in Future World, a theme song was also given to the pavilion. At first, the Sherman brothers wrote a song for it, since they had done the same for the Carousel of Progress, which Horizons was essentially the spiritual successor of. It was called Reaching New Horizons, but ultimately was deemed not to fit with the futuristic, mature themes of the attraction. So George Wilkins, along with cues from John Debney, wrote much of the new score for the pavilion, which honestly is a brilliant piece of music that tied the whole experience together. Horizons operated through the 80s and early 90s with minimal changes. Honestly, the largest of which was the removal of the Prologue and the Promise mural, when GE executives found that Horizons wasn't commonly associated with their sponsorship. So the exit tunnel was pretty drastically renovated in 1986, with colorful lights and a GE logo at the end. It's actually unknown what ended up happening to McCall's painting, and only reproductions of it have been shown since. According to Imagineer Marty Sklar, it was supposed to be rolled up and shipped to California, but never made it. It's most likely that the mural has since been destroyed, just 3 years after it had been put up. Other than this, Horizons stood mostly the same and a pretty popular attraction. It also moved a ton of people, around 2,600 an hour, so there was rarely a wait. For many, the message of hope and the way it had been executed was really inspiring, and it became a favorite attraction for those who loved the original purpose of Epcot Center. It would be fair to say, though, that not everyone loved it. Some may have found it boring and by the early 90s, maybe looking a little tired. For a jaded and particularly young crowd going to Epcot, it was probably not the most exciting thing to experience. However, for a very dedicated and enthusiastic few, the entire experience was truly something special. In 1993, General Electric's 10-year contract had come up for renewal. Despite the estimated $50 million GE had already spent on the attraction over their tenure, they decided not to renew as Horizon's sponsor. According to the Orlando Sentinel, a GE spokesperson claimed the pavilion, quote, does not meet our current needs. Disney would now take on the full operations and costs associated with the attraction, with their own spokesperson saying, quote, we are talking to a number of companies for sponsorship. And like all major pavilions, we are looking to update, renovate, and make changes in the shows. While Disney continued talks with other partnerships, the signs out front now covered the GE logo, and all references to the company were then removed. Horizons was now at the whim of Disney. To make matters worse, Epcot already lost another big attraction sponsor around the same time, and the parks division as a whole was putting out fires after the disastrous launch of Euro Disneyland. Horizons was now also starting to have mechanical issues, with frequent breakdowns and a general dated feel. It was pretty much operating exactly the same as the day it opened in 1983. The attraction was due for an upgrade with new films, projector technology, and other general enhancements. These were ultimately deemed as too expensive of an undertaking, and by this point, Disney was in a delicate position. The thinking was most likely that they didn't want to spend the money to operate a pavilion they knew they would be closing within the decade anyways. So, rather quickly, they were ready to pull the plug. Horizons closed with no announcement and no explanation in December of 1994. The attraction sat unused for nearly a year until December of 1995. 2 of the 3 pavilions flanking Horizons had been closed down for major renovations. Universe of Energy was being turned into Ellen's Energy Adventure, and World of Motion into Test Track. With everything being closed apart from Wonders of Life, Future World East had no attractions to eat up the large crowds expected for the holiday season. So, park operations decided to bring back the idle Horizons attraction to help with the crowds. Ultimately, this is how things would last for the next few years, as Horizons was brought online temporarily until Test Track opened. Behind the scenes though, Disney was very much exploring new ideas for the building. One such idea came in 1996 and was set to revive the Space Pavilion idea, which had been proposed since the beginning of the park. This concept was called Space, a journey into imagined realities. The attraction would have utilized the existing ride system and would have brought guests through a 4-act story visualizing humanity's relationship with space. Included in this would have been a simulator experience somewhat similar to what Soarin' turned out to be later on. Honestly, it wasn't a terrible replacement idea for Horizons. There was also ideas that called for a complete gutting of the existing show building to open it up for an expo-style space with smaller attractions included in it, much like Wonders of Life. The 1996 one, though, in particular, would have revised the existing exterior, bringing the sloping roofline down to the ground and adding a peak at the top, effectively making Horizons into a pyramid. Without a sponsor attached to these concepts though, and the required budget and feasibility of using the existing structure too high, the retrofit never moved forward. Instead, Horizons continued to operate almost exactly the same as it did when it opened, clearly now dated for the modern late 90s guests. Ever since the temporary 1995 reopening, rumors of Horizons' imminent closure were swirling. Test Track was supposed to open in 1997, but was ultimately delayed until 1999. On New Year's Eve 1998, Disney officially announced that Horizons would close permanently on January 9th, 1999. This would ultimately be just a day before Test Track began to soft open. Disney followed through with these plans and closed Horizons on January 9th. Without really any future plans for the site. The beloved attraction was now in limbo, with the building and ride now effectively abandoned. Ropes blocked the main entrance with just a sign reading, "Coming soon, a new discovery," stating the ambiguous future. It would sit this way for another 10 months until members of the press were given a ride-through of the attraction, presumably for the park's October 1st anniversary. However, there don't seem to be any photos or videos, or really even any official press to this claim. It does seem a little strange that Disney allowed this, but it also confirmed that the ride was still intact and apparently ready to go, which of course sparked rumors of a New Year's Eve reopening to handle the crowds. This never happened though, and that press event would be the last time anyone would ride Horizons again. On January 31st, 2000, the Orlando Sentinel reported that Disney was finalizing negotiations on a new pavilion for Epcot called Mission Space. Obviously a space-themed attraction that would replace Horizons. Soon, a black work wall was erected around the former pavilion, at first with a simple space logo, then a sign reading, "Watch this space" for a future announcement. That announcement came on April 21st, 2000, when Disney held a rather large nighttime event announcing Mission Space with Disney CEO Michael Eisner, along with the CEO of their new corporate sponsor, Compaq. The whole event was pretty weird actually, with Michael Eisner unveiling a massive Compaq keyboard for some reason, giving little detail of the new pavilion, and Compaq CEO stating,
"In fact, it's going to be so big that the current building won't hold it."
Which is a claim that would turn out to be objectively false. The whole thing concluded with fireworks being shot off the roof of Horizons. At least symbolically, it looked like they were blowing up Horizons, and really seemed like everyone was pretty thrilled to get rid of the building. There were even hard hats made to commemorate the following event, reading "The Horizons Demolition Party." It was all a little strange, as not many Disney attractions get this gleeful treatment of destroying something that their company built. Anyways, that day finally came as demolitions soon began in late April of that same year. While some AA figures were reused for parts, and some iconic show props were saved and presumably put in the archives, the demolition revealed that large sets were also coming down with it. That's not to say that much wasn't saved, as small items began popping up on eBay shortly after, likely from people grabbing whatever they could. The ride vehicles were seen being transported off-site and were actually sold to a theme park ride reseller called PRI. They actually popped up on their website in 2002 as a complete set of 175 ride cars and their control systems, all for just $350,000. They didn't come with the track, however, and it's unknown what ultimately happened to the bulk of them. They were likely all destroyed. Some, though, did survive and made it into private hands. By May, visible demolition could be seen from guest areas, and soon, the entire structure was brought down. The site was cleared by August of 2000, and work on Mission Space started up soon after. Just over 3 years later, Mission Space opened on August 13th, 2003. It opened as basically a centrifuge ride system, which is similar to the training vehicles used at NASA. Guests would enter a somewhat claustrophobic pod and would experience high G-forces as they simulated a rocket takeoff. Prior to the opening, HP, which merged with Compaq, became the new sponsor, and the first reviews started to come out. The general consensus, I think, was that while thrilling, there was little substance to the whole experience. For some, that intensity mixed with close quarters and spinning proved to be too much of a deterrent, and forced the park to open a less intense version of the ride. Still, lots of people got sick, and some even ended up dying. Regardless, Disney went on a massive marketing campaign with the attraction. At the end of the day, Mission Space is a fine pavilion. It was updated in 2017 with a new film, and then a restaurant called Space 220 was added in late 2021. The restaurant's actually really cool. At this point though, the ride has been around much longer than Horizons was, and that fact is kinda sad. In total, Horizons was only open for collectively 14 years. An attraction that cost the equivalent of $200 million adjusted for inflation only lasted for 14 years. And let's be honest, Disney was pretty enthusiastic on getting rid of it. If it wasn't for certain circumstances, it would have been closed a lot earlier than that. I think it became clear that nobody at the company really wanted to spend the money to keep it around, especially when the direction of Epcot was no longer an education mixed with entertainment, instead moving primarily towards thrill and then eventually IP. Once General Electric decided they would not front the cost for an upgrade, Horizons was doomed. Tack on rumors of unstable ground, constant maintenance, and building repairs, a new corporate sponsor would want an entirely new, shiny attraction. Disney was going through their own hardships at the time and were not going to spend the money on an aging attraction. And that's essentially what happened. Mission Space is a very 2000s ride, with nowhere near the amount of charm or even story behind it. It's a ride and a thrilling simulator, but that's about it. What it replaces, though, was genuinely something special. Epcot Center had already wrapped up development, which meant the best Imagineering had to offer spent time on Horizons. People like Marty Sklar, George McGinnis, Claude Coates, John Hench, and many more. The unbelievable artistry, creativity, and genuine care shows so well in the end product. Perhaps it wasn't something everyone appreciated at the time, but really shines now juxtaposed to the attraction that replaced it, or really all of Epcot's future world. Maybe it's a bit nihilistic for me to say, but Disney would never build something like Horizons again. Not for a lack of creativity or money, but a lack of drive to do so. It's a fundamental and philosophical shift, and because of that, I think it's why so many miss Horizons. It was a vision of hope and optimism shown not through the instrument of a brand or intellectual property, but through the human spirit. It had a genuine story to tell, and was something that made Epcot so special. Marty Sklar said, quote, "Horizons is the type of pavilion that I think Walt had in mind when he visualized Epcot." This really makes a lot of sense, since Horizons is pretty much the 80s version of the Carousel of Progress. For that reason, it will always be one of the most authentic modern-day Disney attractions ever. Probably one of the last ever to be made. This iconic manifestation of all the best parts of the Epcot vision will forever go down as one of the most beloved attractions that was ultimately abandoned. Horizons was very much a product of the 1980s, and you can obviously see that in the ride itself, but also in its architecture. George McGinnis and architect Bill Norton designed the building to look modern, yet ambiguous to what's inside. The distinctive lines lead your eyes upward, and the careful slopes all come together to make it look like a horizon. So I wanted to do something special and tangible just for this video. Between myself, my partners at Standard and Nebula, and a small team of designers, we have created 3 models of some of the interesting architecture that I really love around Disney. There's of course Horizons, then there's the Spaceship Earth entrance plaza, and very uniquely, the never-built Asian resort, which was supposed to go on the Seven Seas Lagoon. It's where Grand Floridian now sits. I love this kind of thing. Analyzing details at a miniature scale and appreciating the size of everything is all really interesting to me. It's why I have a massive model cruise ship in my office. And I've always wondered why people don't make their own, and it turns out there's a reason why nobody does this. It's really hard and really time consuming. So I've spent close to 3 months with vendors and 3D modelers crafting these limited series of models, having them be as accurate and proportionate as possible, while also getting them to a very reasonable price for what they are. You can have them in grayscale or have them colored, and you can pre-order them right now. Go to shop.brightsunfilms.com or click the link in the description below to see all the info on them and have the opportunity to genuinely get something special and unique. These won't last forever, so do pre-order sooner rather than later. Whenever I do merch, I always try and do something special and unique, and trust me, these were not easy to do. So I hope this is something you could take away from this video, and really all of my channel, and I hope you enjoy the models. My name is Jake, and thank you very much for watching.